So, hello everyone. We're Two Peas in a Library. You can go find us on Instagram at the same name. This month we did Every Day by David Levithan.
So, Every Day by David Levithan is about this kind of being who goes by A, and every day of their life they have woken up in the body of a new person, and every day they have to figure out who they are, what the memories of that person are, and how they are relevant to them just making it through the day without screwing up that person's life too bad, because what they do essentially affects the person that they're kind of like possessing. So as they grew old enough to understand like what was happening, and they grew old enough to understand that what was happening to them wasn't normal, they definitely became more self-conscious about their actions while they're in that person. But one day they end up possessing the body of a boy named Justin. Justin, not the sweetest character you'll meet in the book, but A does fall in love with Justin's girlfriend, Rhiannon. And after that day, regardless of who they happen to be possessing, they do everything that they can, regardless of how it affects the person they're possessing, to meet up with Rhiannon, to get to know her, to try to be with her. And that's kind of what creates the central conflict to the story. And obviously, the fact that they're possessing other people's lives and using them as kind of pawns to see Rhiannon, it creates a lot of issues. And so that is what we're going to mainly be basing our review off of today, as long as basic things like writing style and such. And so, yeah, we'll just jump right into it.
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I can start.
Okay.
So I gave this book 3-star review, and I feel like that was kind of a rare opinion, because I feel like this book had a lot of popularity, but there was just something about the overall way that the story was written. My main issue was that I was just not engaged. Obviously, this was such a beautiful concept because it's supposed to be a concept that brings to light issues such as, because like, A possesses anybody, whether or not it's male or female, so that's supposed to like represent and confront like a bunch of like gender stereotyping issues kind of. And I just thought that it was a really good concept about like loving people for who they are, and rather than their gender. And so I was really excited to read it, but like I said, I wasn't engaged. I wasn't as attached to the characters as I wanted to be, with it being such a sentimental concept. One of the things that I had an issue with was Rhiannon's character. When A meets Rhiannon, they kind of make her out to be like this such kind-hearted, warming, and happy-go-lucky person, and that's something that they really fall in love with in regards to her. But as I get to know her throughout the book, I just feel like she didn't meet that expectation. Like, she wasn't at all what I thought she was going to be, so that kind of like ruined her character for me. And there's like a certain, I feel like, expectation that I feel like the author tried to uphold, but just didn't quite uphold it. He just didn't quite meet the expectation that this book had, which was kind of disappointing. Like, there are just some issues, like issues revolving around like transgender, that he just didn't quite hit right, and just some, I don't want to say like moral issues, but some things that I would classify as like somewhat moral issues, keeping in mind that these characters are only like 16. But I just feel like the book was written in a way that was trying to take it too seriously for a love that was only supposed to be between 16-year-olds. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, and we'll get into all of those issues like in a bit, like, so. Yeah. But for me, like, I enjoyed the book. I gave the book like I think I said a 3.5 out of 5 stars, because like I enjoyed it. Like, it's kind of like, because I also think of it as like David Levithan had, like, if you read his synopsis in the back of the book, he's a children's book editor, and the author of several books for young adults, which I definitely think this really falls into, where it's definitely for like kind of like puberty age to maybe like 17. Like, people, I don't think, but like older people would really get into it as much. Like, I liked the story, the concept was good. I don't think I liked A as a character, because as we'll get into later, like, they kind of start doing like a lot of problematic things. And then I think because A puts Rhiannon on this pedestal, that's kind of where like you're not liking her comes into play, because like she is like this caring person, but she doesn't necessarily understand how to be with A, like how she can truly be in love with A, because like they say in the book, like she says that she can't like be with A because she doesn't want to have to wake up every day next to someone new. A'll sometimes be in like a woman's body, and Rhiannon is straight, so she just can't feel that same connection to a woman, as like, whereas A is like, I don't really care, I don't consider, it's like sometimes I do feel more like a boy and sometimes I do feel more like a girl and sometimes I'm neither. Whereas Rhiannon is like, and it is a valid point, like Rhiannon, like not being attracted to A as a woman is a valid point, because like if you're straight you won't be attracted to the same gender, and if like all of that. So but I just think like some of the things that they do is not like good, like they don't keep their morals, where they because like you said, that they start kind of like screwing people's lives just to be able to see Rhiannon, and it kind of like, as the audience, it kind of sucks reading A do that, because it's like, I don't know, you always kind of want to root for your protagonist, and that's after like one of the chapters you just kind of start being like, okay, what's going to happen here? And then like at some point A uses a boy named Nathan to go see Rhiannon at a party, and royally like screws up and doesn't leave, because every day at midnight A jumps into a new body, so A royally screws up and is there at the party till like 11:30 or something, and the boy lives like 45 minutes away or something like that, so A is obviously not going to get home. So then it becomes like a kind of plot point where the boy Nathan is trying to get A to talk to him, and like is saying that it was demonic possession and all this other stuff, and that's just a whole plot point that I think was unnecessary.
Yeah, because A has until like midnight to get home, and obviously he didn't meet that deadline, and so he just left this kid stranded on the side of the road.
Yeah, like, and then like it's just a whole plot point with like this character Reverend Poole, who is apparently another person like A, where they can possess whoever, and it's just like a whole, I think they could have done that plot point a lot better. Like I think like it was just kind of done like not well, because it's kind of like A meets with Reverend Poole, like it doesn't mean to meet with Reverend Poole, but Nathan tricks A into meeting with Reverend Poole, and automatically A doesn't like them, which is valid, but at the same time it's like because Reverend Poole tells A that like, what if I told you that you can possess one person for like the rest of your life or for longer than a day? And at first A is like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, and then A is like, well, like starts thinking like, well, what happens to like the soul that's in the body? Like, does it go somewhere else? Does it become something like me where they're bouncing around? Does it like, what happens to that soul? And automatically assumes Reverend Poole is evil, because he won't tell A like what happens to them, even though A never asks.
Yeah, and also like I feel like that was another issue with the book, is that you start off reading this book and thinking that the romance and how A and Rhiannon are gonna make it work. You kind of start off thinking that that's like the main like plot of the novel, but and so that makes the whole like Reverend Poole situation kind of come out of left field, and it's like whoa, like what's actually supposed to be the main point here? Like there wasn't enough time building up to that being a key plot point, you know? So it just kind of came out of left field for me.
Yeah, because Nathan is like the 5th or like 6th chapter or something in the book, because like some chapters are like only like 2 pages long, but some are like longer when he actually meets up with Rhiannon. They usually are longer, but it's still like there was no like build up, because like you said, like you think that this romance is going to be the whole thing, because like literally, at least on the front of my book, it says every day a different body, every day a different life, every day in love with the same girl. So you figure this romance, it's like a romance novel, which is why we're covering it in February, because you know it's Valentine's.
Easy.
So yeah, but then it like throws this whole thing out of left field, and it's kind of like, okay, I can roll with this, and then it doesn't like really go anywhere. Like you kind of like, falls flat.
Yeah, absolutely. And like another thing that I kind of wanted to point out that I only realized it as you were talking about it. One of the key things that I had against Rhiannon's character, well, it wasn't really against her, but I think it's one of the reasons why it made her come off here to me, was because obviously, you know, that she's 16, a straight 16-year-old girl who's never probably had to face any kind of issues such as, you know, being attracted to a woman or stuff like that, so she doesn't really know like what to think, because she's kind of being confronted with it and it's being shoved in her face. So like that kind of like levies out my reaction to Rhiannon, because thinking of it that way, I can kind of understand how she must be like, oh my god, like what the heck is happening right now. So
Yeah,
that kind of alleviates my dislike of her, I guess.
Yeah, because like we said, they're 16. Like, it's not like they're probably not going to be together forever, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, like it's 16-year-old love as much as you can be in love at 16. Like, so one of the biggest problems that we both had in the book was the chapter where A possesses Vic, who is a transgender character, female to male. So, and like, it's just a very problematic thing, because like at some point A does possess Rhiannon, and they kind of learn that like, oh, like some of the memories do kind of stay, like the person who he possesses brain kind of rewires itself to like fill in any gaps. Like they can remember that they went to school. One boy remembers that he went to Starbucks but doesn't know why. Like he just went to Starbucks because he wanted Starbucks, I guess. But then like so that kind of got me a lot of problems with like Vic, because like we said, Vic's a transgender person, very like out and proud about it, and already has a girlfriend, A. And B, when A goes to meet up with Rhiannon that day, they both of them like A explains it very problematically, like doesn't try to like explain the best way of it, like and then David Levithan, I don't even think he like even talked to anyone that was transgender, because basically his definition that he puts in the book is living life as a boyish girl or a girlish boy, which we all know isn't how transgender works. Like if they had even just talked to 3 different transgender people, like he would have gotten like 3 different stories on it, because like some transgender people like don't like are kind of more okay with being just the name change and the pronouns change, while some others like want to go through the full medical change, and some are like okay with just partial medical change and all of that. So it was just a very problematic chapter, because Rhiannon is super closed off. Like she doesn't even care. Like she doesn't want to try to think about what A is like as. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's kind of the language she uses. Like she doesn't want to know what A is. She just knows that A is something, but she doesn't care. And so when they're talking about the person's body, because A does have access to their memories, and so A knows that Vic has a date with his girlfriend later in that day, but they only use she pronouns, female pronouns, which is very problematic for any transgender person to use the wrong pronouns. And as I said, the person can remember some things from the day, so like A doesn't necessarily know that Vic won't remember that they used female pronouns in reference to them. So
yeah. That was actually something I was going to bring up too, how when A and Rhiannon were talking about Vic, that Rhiannon especially kept using she pronouns, and so that was something I was going to bring up. I was like
yeah, and then A like never corrects her, even though A is very like, I'll say new agey with like the gender kind of problems, where like we said, they don't always, like, sometimes they feel more like a boy and sometimes they feel like a girl and then sometimes they don't feel like anything. So like you'd think that they'd be a little more aware of that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I just, like I said, everything that you're saying just makes like these thoughts pop into my head like on the spot. So I'm sorry, but like that's like another thing that kind of like upsets me about A's character as well, is because he is naturally so fluent and okay like with these like gender issues and stuff like that, because he's like they live their whole life like that, so like they're so naturally like fluid and they don't really care. A person is a person and he just is enjoying what he can. But when it comes to pleasing Rhiannon, that morality for him almost seems to go out the window. Mm-hmm. Like morality of trying to respect other people's identity kind of goes out the window when it comes to wanting to be someone that Rhiannon can feel attracted to. And that's just something that I also didn't quite agree with, because that's like changing a big part of who you are.
Yeah, like I think we talked about this a little before. In my theory was that like the whole book, like I don't know if anyone else has heard of the theory where like soulmates are people who's like, because we're all carbon-based life forms, so like you're kind of molecules or whatever were like near each other during like the Big Bang or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you become soulmates. Like you find the person who has like the same molecules as you or something like that. So I think that's kind of what David Levithan was going for. It kind of seems like almost, where, because A is very dead set on, this is the person I want to be with, like this is a big love in my life, like even though they're 16 and
he kind of disregards like what that would mean for Rhiannon. Like there's like a lot of issues that we'll still like further get into, where it kind of highlights the fact that A kind of forces things that shouldn't be forced, and especially upon her, to try to make this work. And she seems like such a people pleaser that she tries, but obviously in the end it just doesn't work out, and she ends up feeling really guilty for something she shouldn't feel guilty for.
Yeah, because it's like the same with like Justin, where because she, like, they were not in a good relationship. It was not a healthy relationship, like but she's such a people pleaser that like she's always the one apologizing even though it's like his fault or whatever. So it's like one of those relationships. So then A is like trying to force her into accepting the fact that A is always going to wake up in a new body and all of that. And then at the end, A is like, hey, did I tell you that I could find a way to stay in one body? And then like kind of pieces out after that, which was also
that was such
like big thing.
That was such like a douche move, because he like totally teases her with the idea that, oh my gosh, like, so like Rhiannon obviously likes A for who they are beyond the person that they're possessing, but like, so they tease her with this idea like, hey, like we can actually make this work, but I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna yeet on out of here instead.
Yeah, because like not the last chapter, but the second to last chapter, he's in like a boy named Alexander or something. Yeah. I think and it's like he's a very attractive boy. He is very smart. Him and Rhiannon have a lot in common, and like he has like a couple little quirks that A knew that Rhiannon would love. Mm-hmm. So A like does a whole date thing with Rhiannon, and then pops that on her, and then is like, actually no, I'm gonna leave, but here's this boy that you can date even though you just broke up with your other boyfriend. Yeah,
like A doesn't seem to have like a lot of boundary when it comes, because like obviously like Rhiannon and Justin had a very toxic relationship, but they were together for 3 years, and after that amount of time you kind of learn to like get really attached and learn to love someone, and he just didn't have any kind of respect for the fact that Rhiannon needs space to like get over, especially at 16. Every breakup at 16 feels like the end of the world, so like obviously she needed space to get over it, and then he just doesn't respect that, and that's something that really bugs me.
Yeah, like, but yeah, it's like, it's definitely like, they're definitely 16, they're definitely young teenagers. Mm-hmm. Like you can it's definitely so bad that they're that young. Like I think it would have been interesting if David Levithan had written it as like they're older, like maybe in college or something, because I think it would have been a better time for like that story, you know. Like I think it would have been better.
Yeah, like so many things that just morally rub me the wrong way.
Well, and then there's another problematic chapter is when A wakes up in a very he says 300 plus pounds, I think.
Yeah.
Boy. And like I just find it problematic because it's kind of like it's a kind of a fat shaming chapter, because he's like saying like it takes a lot more effort to move. It like just kind of like it doesn't take any actual issue and kind of deal with it. It just kind of is like, these are the problems with it, and even though I know I can't change this person, it still sucks that I have to be this person, like kind of thing. And A like kind of plays around with the idea of like, oh, maybe I'll scare them so bad that they'll start a diet or something like that. And it's just, and this isn't even about Rhiannon. This is just, though he does think like Rhiannon isn't going to be attracted to.
Yeah. He openly says that they're embarrassed to go meet her in such a body, and it's like there's like they go like they're in that body, they go like on like a movie date, and they just go into like weird gruesome details about like what it is about that poor boy's body that makes Rhiannon uncomfortable. And I'm like, I was uncomfortable reading it. I'm like, okay. Like, called out that just didn't need to be pointed out. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. It was a very problematic chapter.
Yeah.
Like,
ugh, I'm getting triggered.
Yeah. It was like we said, like I said anyways, the concepts are great, but the way that they do it is not.
Yeah. And sorry, like I'm trying to find the chapter where A possesses that boy, because the way that even the chapter begins is highly triggering.
Yeah, and the chapters aren't like labeled with like, oh, like the names of the people he's possessing or whatever. It goes by day. So it goes from day like day, the first day that we start with A is day 5,994, and then we leave A off on day 6,064, 65.
Yeah. But like, hang on, I really want to find that chapter because it is appalling to me. So bear with me for just a second.
Yeah, while you're looking for that, there's another chapter where like it's kind of, so there's like one weekend where A and Rhiannon are meeting up at Rhiannon's uncle's cabin to like just hang out, you know. And the first body A is in is an attractive male body, so Rhiannon is trying to like get A to have sex, but A is just, I don't know if they're not ready for it or what, but they decide that they're not going to have sex by claiming that it's the body's first time and he doesn't want to like take it away from the body.
Which is apparently one of the few moral lines that he doesn't feel comfortable crossing.
Yeah, apparently. And then the next day, A is possesses a girl. I don't remember what her name is, but possesses a girl, and like when they wake up, they're highly hungover because the girl had gone out and drank a whole bunch. And it was very like, and the girl is very like, it's a very traumatizing thing for the family because the girl had actually accidentally like killed her brother from drinking.
So highly triggering for one thing.
Yeah, it's a very like traumatizing thing to read because it's like, oh my god. And then like for the girl to just go out and do that, it's like, why would you try to do that kind of thing?
There's also like a chapter earlier to that one where the A possesses the body of a girl named Kelsey, I think, and she is a very so like a high trigger warning because this goes very deep into like the thought process behind like very heavy suicidal ideations and tendencies. So this girl is like very chemically imbalanced and she is very suicidal, and basically A has to go through her day struggling with that, and like A ends up finding like a journal, and I believe that journal kind of marks all the ways that she has thought about killing herself and the day that she is actually going to do it. And A kind of has to go through that mental and moral struggle, like, should I just leave her like this, or should I actually affect her life in such a way where she'll be set in a position to get help when she wakes up the next morning. So that was like another
I think that like it's definitely like, I think that's one of the better written chapters because it kind of like encompasses like how depression really is in like a good way, where it's not like just this being super sad a lot. It's like
it's
they
on page 120 of my book in case you want to reference it.
They use like, he uses good imagery, like saying that it's not like it's like a black cloud that's following them like a lot of people do. It's
because he uses like the imagery of like the black cloud where it kind of consumes the person, or it's like a black dog that kind of just follows the person around. And I really like the analogy.
Yeah, so it's like it's kind of it can be an upsetting chapter, but I think it's a good like thing to kind of tackle with. Like it's done well, unlike some of the other ones.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like dead set on finding this one chapter. Maybe I just won't find it today. But there is a chapter that I do want to kind of, that I did find that I wanted to talk about. So A is obviously in love with Rhiannon, but she is obviously with Justin. And A is trying to get her to see that Justin is very toxic and not good for her. He doesn't care about her the way that she cares about him. And so one morning when A wakes up in this body of a very beautiful girl, that kind of raises a lot of issues in my mind, because not only does it stereotype what a girl needs to be beautiful almost, but like the chapter literally starts out by saying, I wake up the next morning in Beyonce's body, and I was kind of like, oh, cringe. But and so it's just a very beautiful girl, and they're hanging, her and Rhiannon are hanging out together, and obviously Rhiannon isn't attracted to females, so this is like one of the chapters where they're not exactly romantic towards each other. And A is again trying to convince her that Justin is not the one for her, and she's kind of getting fed up with it. She's like, why can't you just like let me handle my own relationship, you know? And they end up coming to a very rushed and not thought out conclusion that they need to, the three of them need to meet up with Justin, A, and Rhiannon need to meet up and have lunch so that A can have a chance to prove that given the chance of being in front of this very beautiful girl, Justin would flirt with her instead of Rhiannon and stuff like that, like trying to get him to cheat. Which was very triggering for my very romantically driven heart and mind, because that is just not okay. You know, because I know like Rhiannon wanted to prove a point, and so did A, so that's kind of why they both kind of went along with it at first. But number one, like as much as I don't necessarily root for Justin, like poor Justin, because he's like trying to figure out like why am I in the middle of this thing that I don't even know what it is. So like Justin's very confused, and Rhiannon soon realizes that she doesn't want to be in that position because like who would want to be in the position of thinking that their boyfriend is just gonna go off with a girl like much prettier than them, you know? Like it's like ridiculous. It was a very ridiculous chapter.
Rhiannon, so another thing with Rhiannon is that she makes very solid points where like a as Nathan, when they're at the party, is like they're talking about relationships or something, and A's like basically saying that he doesn't think any relationship can really last longer than a year or something. Like I don't remember the exact thing, but then Rhiannon is like, well, I've been with my boyfriend for 3, and A is trying to like not so subtly get her to like realize that Justin is not good for her. And then when she obviously finds out, like after that, A is tells her about like what they are kind of, and that's when Rhiannon is kind of like, so all this stuff you were saying, like you don't even have any experience with it, like you don't understand like how love works, and like there's just a lot of details that A doesn't understand about relationships and stuff, which is very obvious throughout the whole book. Like when A, as the really hot girl, like tries to flirt with Justin and doesn't like try to do it like in subtle ways, he just goes full out like grabbing Justin's thigh and like not being subtle about it at all. And then Justin freaks out because, you know, this random person just grabbed my thigh.
Yeah, and it's like
I found the weight chapter you were also looking for.
Oh yeah, what page is it on?
270 for my book.
270.
It's day 6025.
Yeah. Yeah, so like obviously, so like the chapter starts out where he's like, it's hard to raise my head from the pillow. It's hard to like move it all. He says because I must weigh at least 300 pounds, which that in of itself like is a hard, like that's kind of fact. Like if you weigh that much, obviously it's going to be a little bit hard to move, but you know, like whatever. But the way that he describes it, it's like very like repulsive, and I hate the fact that any author would use this to describe any kind of body type. But it says, it's as if sacks of meat have been tied to my limbs, to my torso. It takes so much more effort to do anything because this is not muscular heaviness. I am not a linebacker. No, I'm fat, flabby, unwieldy, fat. And that bugs me like hardcore.
And he says, like, Finn Taylor has retreated for most of the world. His size comes from negligence and laziness, a carelessness that would be pathological if it had any meticulousness to it.
Yeah, which isn't always the case because like a lot of like weight gain issues can like come from like serious issues like depression or like mental health issues. So the fact that that was just completely disregarded is like really bugging to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
but he has like a few problematic chapters, like that one and the transgender one, and then I think the last chapter is pretty problematic because in the end, A decides that he's going to run away from Reverend Poole because they don't want to have to deal with him. I don't know exactly, but A decides he's gonna run away from Reverend Poole, and A has the theory that like the way that they hop bodies is that like it's dependent on like how many people of that age are around. So they're in, I don't know exactly what state that it takes place in, but there aren't a lot of 16-year-olds in that state or whatever. So A basically hijacks this girl's body and like leaves to go to like New York or someplace that has a high volume of kids that are their age, which I don't know, like I understand why A is doing it, but at the same time it's like I don't necessarily see Reverend Poole as a bad guy because it's like they don't, A doesn't ask any like questions, like A doesn't ask like what happens to the person that you're possessing for a longer time, like doesn't ask anything like that.
Yeah. All we have right now about Reverend Poole is that there's like an evil glint in his eye. Like, so, like that's really all it gives us.
Like, it doesn't say that he's outwardly evil. Like, he just wants to get to know A, kind of, like, and is saying, because A is growing up thinking that they're the only one of their kind, so...
Yeah. I get the plot point that David Levithan was trying to make, he just didn't do it in a way that had the effect that he wanted.
Yeah, it's like, oh, just so you know, this dude who you've never met is evil because they won't tell you where the soul of the person that you're possessing goes or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I just think that that's like a very underdeveloped plot point and very flimsy at best.
Yeah. And given the fact that, you know, there is a sequel to this book, but given the fact that we read that it was more the same story told from Brianna's perspective, I highly doubt that it's going to elaborate on that any more than it already has, which is very frustrating. Because I feel like if you're going to turn that into like a plot, you have to.
Well, I think there's a third book also, but I don't know like what the third book is. But I know the second book, like there's another book called Another Day, which is from Rhiannon's perspective, which we haven't decided whether we're going to cover it or not. Like,
if you think we should, comment.
Yes.
I think the other book is called Someday. It's Every Day, Another Day, and then Someday, I think.
Something, yeah. But, so it is like a trilogy, but we're not sure if we're going to tackle it yet. Like, we know we're going to compare it to the movie because I'd be interested to see like what people they picked and chose to stay in the movie and like what people they like changed up, because like in my book I have pictures like screen grabs from the movie, and there's one person I kind of thought that they'd have a picture in this, but I guess not. But this dude, the fatter dude, I don't think that's the fat guy, because I think he has a different name in the movie.
I'm very curious to see how closely the movie actually follows the concepts of the book.
There's a picture. It's James, which I don't think, because that's not the name of the fat guy in the book. The fat guy in the book is Finn. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Like, do they keep the Nathan plot point in, or do they actually make it just a full-on love story? So we'll have that out later this month, but definitely this month.
Yeah. So overall, I definitely feel like this book was meant to hit a couple of key social issues, but ended up falling victim to involving a lot more social issues that I just don't think he realized were sensitive. I get what he's trying to do, so I can appreciate that, which is why I give it a 3-star, but the execution was poorly planned.
Yeah, like the problematic chapters that we talked about, like the transgender chapter and then the fat shaming chapter. It's just kind of like there's ways that you can go about that. Like I said, I don't even think he talked to anyone that's transgender, because like you're not necessarily a boyish girl or a girlish boy. Like that kind of to me reads more as like gender neutral, or non-binary versus actually transgender. But transgender is also like an umbrella term for all of that. So
because the way that David Levithan still tried to broach the subject of transgender, he still made it seem like being transgender is still a matter of being one or the other, which is not entirely the case. So like definitely shows that he wasn't entirely knowledgeable on the subject that he was writing about, which for any author can be problematic. Especially like for the audience that this book was definitely more pointed towards. You know, there might be a lot of teenagers and kids who are struggling with their identity and thinking that they might be transgender, and reading this, it might either like trigger them or confuse them, you know, so it definitely, if you're going to write about it, try to be a little bit more knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, like in the chapter, like when they meet up for food, or for like when they meet up later in the day, Rhiannon is like, so you're a girl who's a boy, she says something like that, I sense she doesn't want to get into it. And it's kind of like, that's not necessarily a whole thing, because then A also is like, definitely, like, A definitely in the chapter was definitely going to skip the date with Vic's girlfriend. But then Rhiannon is like, shouldn't, like, isn't their life more important than yours, kind of? Like, you shouldn't, like, screw their life up just because you're obsessed with me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for sure. And, like, A's obsession is already, like, kind of weird to me. Like, I get, like, 16-year-olds, they fall in love easy, like, whatever, but, like, he was pushing so many things onto her. And, like, the topics of transgender and having to deal with, like, LGBTQ stuff when you're a straight female, especially 16, where you may not have had a bunch of introduction to that kind of thing, and having it shoved in your face, like, that's a lot to handle. That's a lot to process. And so, like, he definitely wasn't being very self-conscious as to how that would affect her.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot, because, like, I don't know, like, Rhiannon, this is right after Rhiannon breaks up with Justin. Because, like, and she kind of is harsh with A, because it's like, A is obsessed with her. A doesn't know, like, when to stop, kind of, because, like, Vic lives 3 hours from Rhiannon, and there's been, like, ones where they've traveled further, like, both of them have either traveled, like, 4 hours or met in the middle or something, but, like, they don't always live close to Rhiannon, so then they're just kind of screwing up their, like, the person's life. Like, there's a couple of kids that if they've had cars, then makes them drive to Rhiannon school, like,
yeah. And, like, there's even, like, this one kid who is supposed to, like, go to Hawaii for, like, some wedding, and A completely made him miss the flight so that he could go, because, like, obviously, like, I get, like, his panic, because obviously if he were to go and spend the night in Hawaii, he would kind of be stuck there, like, bouncing between bodies in Hawaii, but, like, still, you don't just mess up somebody's entire, like, family dynamic like that, man.
Yeah, like, the kid fucking, that's the chapter that when Rhiannon breaks up with Justin, because they get caught hugging in the gym.
And Justin sees it and he flips out.
Yeah, and instead of, like, Justin giving 10 seconds to let Rhiannon explain, oh, this is just my friend or some shit, like, this is, like, whatever, Justin immediately punches Michael, which is the boy that he's possessing. And it just, like, and then Michael's dad, like, when he gets home, is like, I was gonna punch you, but I see someone else got to it first, or something like that. And it's like, like, I don't support abuse from anyone, but it's kind of like, I totally get it, because it's like, you just decide.
And A decides to make up the excuse that it was for it was for a concert.
Yeah, like a concert that he couldn't miss. And it's like, because Michael is a metalhead, so, like, but it's just like,
and slight trigger warning, because when Justin does find that A, as Michael is hugging Rhiannon, there are some references to Rhiannon being, like, a metalhead slut or something like that. So a little bit of slut shaming just for hugging another dude. So slight trigger warning. I know that kind of language can be triggering to some people, but
yeah, but it's like,
it's crazy. And
yeah,
like something that I really struggle with, like, I get that this won't be something that a lot of teenagers will learn until they get older, but it's like we said, A is so pushy. Like, the kind of pushy that would absolutely turn me off, especially if I'm already in a relationship. And the fact that he keeps trying to sabotage their relationship, which is not the right way to go about it at all. Like, I get having feelings for someone you can't have, but, like, know a limit, because there comes to a point where you need to love someone enough to let them go, dude. Like, their happiness should matter more to you than whether or not them being happy is with you or not.
Yeah, you know the whole saying, if you love something, set it free, and if it comes back to you, then it's yours, or whatever that is. That's that should be something that A hears like every day.
I don't think he's ever heard it before, given how he's reacting in this book.
Yeah, but
that was so frustrating. It's like, dude, you're sabotaging everything about this poor girl's life, so just slow your roll.
Yeah, it's just, like I've said before, it's definitely teenage, like, you can definitely feel, like, David Levithan does one thing really well in this book, and it's make teenagers be teenagers.
Yeah, because they're rash, they're impulsive, they're completely love dumb, it's completely, it fits,
yeah.
But, like, it makes me think about all the stupid things I did as a teenager in love, and it makes me cringe so hard.
Yeah, because, like, even though, like, we definitely agree that it's definitely for, like, puberty age to, I don't know, 17, 16 or whatever. If you do read it, like, as an adult or as someone who's older, because, like, we're just 20, so it's not like we're not far from that age, but it's also like
you just kind of look at it like the kids.
Yeah, like, which is why I also think that, like, if it was set in like a college or like a more professional area, like, I think it would work almost better at that, because A would have like more life experience or whatever. But I also can see why David Levithan decided to set it as teenagers, because it's kind of like, hey, you remember the dumb shit you did as a teenager? Let me bring that up for you.
So, agree or disagree with me, but I almost feel like it would have been interesting if he had somehow managed to weave into the story, or just like made like kind of like a sequel series of A being older and still going through this. Just kind of see the dynamic between like what it does to teenagers and what it does to like more college students / adults.
Well, we'll have to see what the third book is like, because it could be like that. Like, I don't know the synopsis for the third book.
I am intrigued.
Okay. While you look that up, but yeah, no, like, it's a good book. I don't know if I'd read it again. I'll probably keep it around for like my kids or something, because I do think it's like a kind of good coming of age story, like not in the traditional sense, but I think some of the things he touches on is good. But then some things that he touches on is not good, like.
Okay, hang on. I'm pulling up the synopsis right now on Goodreads, because there is a third book called Someday. And the synopsis is, for as long as A can remember, life has meant waking up in a different person's body every day, forced to live as that person until the day ended. A always thought there wasn't anyone else who had a life like his, but A was wrong. There are others. A has already been wrestling with powerful feelings of love and loneliness. Now comes an understanding of the extremes that love and loneliness can lead to, and what it's like to discover that you are not alone in the world. And someday, David Levithan takes readers further into the lives of A, Rhiannon, and Nathan, and the person they may think they know as Reverend Poole, exploring more deeply the questions at the core of every day and another day. What is a soul and what makes us human? So it looks like it follows the Reverend plot, which is something, if it follows the Reverend plot, I'd read it. Like, I'm now more intrigued to reading the next two books, just to see how it plays out.
If we do the next two books, it won't be till like spring or summer, though.
Yeah,
because we already have
months planned out.
Yeah, like next month we're doing Horns by Joe Hill.
I still need to buy that.
And then I think the month after that we're gonna start the You series.
Yes, You, yeah.
So
another series I need to buy. See how this podcast is already taking my money?
But then, like, we'll definitely, like, I think we might definitely get into the other books, because it'll be interesting, because I definitely want to, whether we cover it on here, do like a baby review, but I definitely want to read at least Another Day, because I think it'd be interesting to see it from Rhiannon's perspective.
Yeah, because like I feel like she's internalizing a lot that doesn't get shown in every day. So I feel like that'll be interesting to see like what mental struggles she's dealing with after what A has been doing. So
Yeah, because it's like, even if it, like, I won't be mad if it, whether it takes place, like, we're basically kind of seeing the same thing that we just saw in Everyday, or if it's like right after where she's quote unquote dating Alexander.
Yeah. I
But
believe that it basically it starts this story over but from Rhiannon's perspective, because there's like an excerpt at the end of my book, and it starts like with the date with Justin at the beach. So
yeah, so I think it'll be interesting, because I definitely, because like we said, A kind of puts Rhiannon on this pedestal and won't take her down from it.
yeah, and she's like, whoa. Too much expectation for me, fam.
Yeah, so I definitely, like, it'll be interesting to see the story from her perspective. But you have anything to add?
Nope, that is it. I think for me, obviously, this book kind of takes you on a roller coaster of like morality, mentality, and social issues. So just be prepared for that because it's a lot to unload.
Yeah, and it does kind of touch on the topic. I'm gonna call it, like, say, like, pansexuality, where like you don't really see the person, you kind of see the soul, which is kind of what A is dealing with, and what he kind of seems to be trying to force Rhiannon to do.
Yeah, which is not something
So
that you can do. Not everyone is going to be able to do that. So that's something that I think the author neglected to understand almost.
yeah, like, unless they purposefully did it that way, which would
Yeah.
be interesting. But yeah, no. So it definitely kind of touches on the topic of, like, oh, we're just human, like, you shouldn't see the body, it should be the soul that you see. And like, A keeps trying to tells Rhiannon that, like, every day that they see, especially when A is in a woman's body, and Rhiannon is like, I get it, I see you, but when you're like the like Finn, who's the 300-pound guy, or a woman, you just can't, like, she just can't connect to
Yeah.
them.
And even like when he's in Finn's body, he even says, this is just a package. You got to look at what's inside, but like I said, that's not easy for everyone because not everyone could, also like it has a lot to do with like how you're socialized. This is something that A has been spending their entire life doing, and Rhiannon, I imagine, doesn't have a lot of outside influence when it comes to like LGBT community and stuff like that, and thinking of it that way. And while like LGBT is like a lot more accepted now, not everyone, there's a difference between not accepting and not understanding, and that's like two different things. So she just doesn't understand.
And also, their, like, whole relationship is over 2 months, like, just over 2 months. I think we factored it to be like 71 days or something like that, but then they don't start dating until like a month into it, so really their relationship is like a month long.
Yeah, and also like when A is trying to formulate a plan that Rhiannon can kind of compromise with to be together, he even suggests like running away to New York, where like the population is higher and there's more bodies to kind of bounce around in, so like it doesn't become that much of an issue. And I'm like, bro, she's 16. Like what?
Yeah. A definitely has like a very romanticized view of relationships, because well, they even say, like, they've never been in a relationship because they don't want to, like, do that, because when they were a little younger, they were in like an online type relationship with this
Yeah,
boy,
yeah,
and they were like, oh yes, we can do this because I can just keep hopping into different people, but then, like, um
issues of like video chatting and
yeah, video chatting and like wanting to meet up, like, oh, I'm coming back to wherever they met, do you want to meet up? And then A is like, oh fuck, like, oh shit, like, I didn't think this far ahead, so that's why A hasn't, like, been in any real relationship.
yeah, and also like I can kind of understand from A's perspective. Obviously, I feel like A might be in a situation because distance, like moving to like different places in different states doesn't really matter to him because obviously he just inhabits other people's bodies and lives. So I can understand where maybe he doesn't feel kind of like the age restriction almost.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously he's able to do stuff like that, whereas like Rhiannon is like, I have a life. Please don't.
Yeah, and like when A does say something about, like, oh, we can move to New York, like, Rhiannon is like, you can kind of see Rhiannon being skeptical, and then A is like, no, we can wait until we're older. Like, so
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Not emotion.
it's a lot. I don't think we necessarily did it total justice in our review, but
Yeah.
I
Well, it's
think I
just
would
like
recommend.
there's just so much. Like you have to like physically experience it.
Yeah, like I think I would definitely recommend it as a reading book, but like don't like, I don't know, don't think of it as like the most romantic love story ever,
Yeah, because it's more
because it's
cringe.
not. It's definitely a teenage love story. It's definitely like, oh my god, these guys are teenagers, and like, so, but
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right. Anything else?
No, but that is it. Like we said, next month we will be doing Horns by Joe Hill. I know this book and the one that we did last time, were more like last month's book was more thriller. This one was more like romance. So for any like, would you call it horror? What would you describe Horns' genre?
Well, the movie like on Netflix is under the horror section, but
Because
I've
Joe
not
Hill is Stephen
seen.
King's son, so like you kind
Yeah.
of assume horror. So
But so far it's not like super horror. It's just kind of like, I don't know. I guess I'd say like thriller almost. Like,
okay.
I'm sure there might be horror themes later on, but like right now it's kind of a slow burn.
Yeah.
I'll say right now,
So keep an eye
that's
out
what
for
we're
that.
doing.
Yeah. And then our next video, I think we'll probably do the movie review in comparison before we do Horn, so that'll be our very next video.
Yep. All right. Again, we are Two Peas in a Library. Find us on Instagram. Thank you.
Au revoir.